Hi guys, how are you doing? My name is Juliet Ako, aka Zabido. And if you're interested in horror or spooky plus true crime stories, I'll be here for you every Saturday. Today's story is a very devastating one, and I don't know where to start from, but I'm going to try as much as possible to keep it short. On the 22nd of March in 1944, on a spring afternoon in the small town of Alcolo, South Carolina, two little white girls, Betty June Benica, who was 11 years old, and her friend Mary Emma Thames, who was 8 years old, rode out with their bicycles to go look for some white flowers called maypops. They rode past the house of a man called Mr. George Stinney Sr., where they met two of his children, George Stinney Jr., who was 14 at the time, and his sister Amy Stinney, who was 7 years old. The girls stopped by to ask George and his sister Amy where they could find the maypops, and George told them they had no idea. Unfortunately, after this encounter, the girls went missing. A search party was launched, and just a day after, on the 23rd of March, the bodies of the two girls were found in a ditch. The girls had been beaten with a weapon reported to be a railroad spike, and they both suffered severe blunt force trauma, which resulted in penetration of their skulls. According to a report given by the medical examiner, these wounds had been, quote, inflicted by a blunt instrument with a round head about the size of a hammer. There was no reported evidence of sexual assault to the younger girl Mary, whereas the genitals of the older girl Betty were slightly bruised. Let's go back a little. We all remember that the girls were last seen riding their bicycles to go look for passion flowers, and the last person to have seen them or spoken to them was George Stinney Jr., right? Now, who is George Stinney Jr.? George was born on the 22nd of October 1929 in a small town of Alcolo, South Carolina, to a man named George Stinney Sr. and Amy Brown Stinney, who was the mother. George Jr. had 5 other siblings, 2 brothers, namely John and Charles, and 3 sisters, Carolina, Catherine, and Amy Stinney. Stinney's father worked at the town's sawmill, and so the family resided in company housing. This was a time when the black and white neighborhoods were separated by railroad tracks. They had different schools, different hospitals, and different churches. So there was little or no interaction between the white neighborhood and the black neighborhood. It was in a time like this that the bodies of Betty and Mary were found on the African American side of Alcolo, and in the state in which their bodies were found. During the search, Stinney's father and even Stinney himself joined the others and the police to search for the girls. And when the police got to know that he was the last person to have seen them alive, suspicion quickly fell on George Stinney Jr. as the last person to have seen them. And the police was like, oh yeah, he did it. First of all, he is black. Second of all, I don't trust black people. On the 24th of March 1944, George and his older brother John were both arrested on the suspicion of murdering the girls, though John was later released. But George was held in custody because his arresting officer, Officer Newman, reported that George had confessed to murdering the girls, and he showed the officers where he hid the murder weapon, being a piece of an iron about 15 inches long. There was no physical evidence that George said any of this, but still he was held in custody. Following Stinney's arrest, his father was sacked from his job at the local sawmill, and the family had to vacate the company housing because they feared for their safety. And George was all alone. He was left alone. His parents were not allowed to visit. Nobody was allowed to visit him. He was denied counsel. He was just all alone. A 14-year-old boy, come on. With nobody to speak for him, he was interrogated alone. The entire proceeding against Stinney, including his jury selection, took place on the 24th of April 1944. More than 1,000 white Americans crowded the courtroom, but no black American was allowed. Stinney was tried before an all-white jury. His parents were not allowed in the courtroom. The only person he had was his court-appointed counsel, who was campaigning for election to local office. And he did not even question the eligibility of the witnesses, the evidences presented in court. He didn't even question the 3 officers who had reported that Stinney already confessed to the murders. I mean, the prosecution had different versions of Stinney's verbal confession. In one version, Stinney had gone to help one of the girls who fell down from the bicycle into the ditch. And when he tried to help, he was attacked by one of the girls, and then in self-defense, he murdered them. In the second version, it was said that Stinney followed the 2 girls and then first attacked Mary, being the younger girl, before attacking June, the older girl. So far, you can see that even the prosecution had different versions to their story, to their evidence. But Stinney's counsel had nothing to question. He had nothing to contribute. He was of no help to Stinney. Other than the testimony of the 3 officers, the prosecutors called in 2 other witnesses. Reverend Francis, being the man who discovered the bodies of the 2 girls in the ditch, and the 2 doctors who performed the examination. Stinney's counsel did not call any witnesses, and the trial presentation only lasted for 2.5 hours. After deliberating for less than 10 minutes, the jury found George Jr. guilty of first-degree murder, and George Philip sentenced him to death by electrocution. There is no transcript of the trial, and no appeal was filed by Stinney's counsel. Stinney's families and friends and church members pleaded with the Governor Olin, for clemency, because he was just a boy. But their pleas were ignored. Between the time of Stinney's arrest and his execution, his parents were only allowed to see him once. As at 7:30 a.m. on Friday, 16th of June, 1944, Stinney was executed. He was prepared for execution by electric chair, using a Bible as a booster seat because he was too tiny. He was literally weighing 90 to 95 pounds. He was then restrained by his arms, legs, and body to the chair. They pulled a strap from the chair and placed it over his mouth. Even the face mask that was placed over his face did not fit. Before he was electrocuted, an officer asked him if he had any last words to say, and his answer was, "No, sir." As the electricity surged through his body, the mask covering slipped off, revealing tears streaming down his face. Stinney was then buried in an unmarked grave at the Calvary Baptist Church Cemetery. In 2014, new evidences were presented by Stinney's siblings that he was with them at the time of the murder. Also, an affidavit was introduced by Reverend Francis, the man who discovered their bodies. In his statements, he recalled that there was not much blood in or around the ditch, suggesting that the girls may have been killed elsewhere and moved to the ditch. Also, Wilford Johnny, a prisoner who was in the prison with Stinney, confessed that Stinney told him he was coerced into making the confession and that he maintained his innocence. Even the testimony given by Stinney's 7th grade teacher in an interview was later debunked. I'll have to read out this one. He said, and I quote, "I remember the day he killed those children. He got into a fight with a girl at school who was his neighbor. In those days, you didn't have to worry about children carrying guns and knives to school. But George carried a little knife and he scratched this child with his knife. I took him outside and we went for a little walk and I talked to him. We went back into the school. In a submissive way, he begged for the child's pardon. Stinney's sister, Amy, later came out to say that when she saw the interview, she reached out to Hamilton. Amy stated, and I quote, "I asked him why he would say something like that. He told me someone paid him to say it. I don't know who paid him, but his exact words were, because they paid me. Rather than approving a new trial, Judge Kamen on the 16th of December 2014 ruled that Steny had not received a fair trial as he was not effectively defended and his Sixth Amendment rights had been violated. She also ruled that his confession was likely coerced and that it was inadmissible. Even though Steny was not fully exonerated, his family and civil rights advocates celebrated the overturning of his conviction, while the relatives of Benica and Mary expressed their disappointment at the court's ruling. Though they acknowledged the fact that Steny's execution was controversial, they never doubted his guilt. At the same time, another niece of Benica, while convinced of Steny's guilt, agreed that he did not receive a fair trial and that he should not have received the death penalty, adding that she felt bad for Steny and his family. With all this happening, there was someone else suspected of committing this murder, a person by the name of George Washington, the son of a wealthy white businessman. He died 2 to 3 years after the murder. It was stated that Steny's mother worked for the Washington's family for a brief period of time. And Steny's sisters recalled that their mother had once come home saying that Washington's father made advances towards her. So Steny's sisters believed that Steny was framed because their mother refused to give it up. Mr. Washington Sr. conducted an initial search for the girls because he was the owner of the territory where the girls' bodies were found and was also the foreman of the grand jury that indicted Steny. 2 elderly women in Akolu also recall that Mr. Washington Jr. was a known womanizer and was also known for committing theft and getting away with it. Lawyers for Steny's family stated that there had been a confession by George Washington Jr. on his deathbed to the mothers of the girls. This story is really a heavy one to take because as it stands, no one knows for sure if the girls were killed by George Steny Jr. or George Washington or someone else. Do you think George Steny was innocent, or do you believe that someone else did it and tried to pin it on George Steny? My heart goes out for those involved in this, the family of Benica, families of Mary, the families of Steny. I really hope they all find peace. I hope so. Have a nice day, guys. Bye.